In order to create this application, I decided to use XAMPP and NetBeans. My application consists entirely of PHP files, so it was necessary to use a form of software that could handle this server-sided language. To write my code, I used NetBeans, which is a free and open source development environment used for application development. In order to see a working test view of my code throughout the building process, I activated XAMPP, which is a software distribution that serves as a suitable environment for testing certain languages, which in my case was PHP. To activate localhost, it was important to start Apache and MySQL within XAMPP in order to give my PHP files access to this pre-configured server. By doing so, I was able to view my application through localhost. So this is the 5 files of my application as seen in NetBeans. The first page of my application is on index.php. In this file, the first step in the application is to prompt the user for their first and last names with a submit button. This is made possible by using a PHP form. At the beginning of the form are 2 important attributes, an action and a method. This ultimately controls where your form data ends up. In this case, the user's input will send him or her to the next page of the application, which is topics.php. I also practice a little bit with cookies, which is another way to store user information. This is the topics page, which is the next one. The first thing I did in this page was create a session start to begin saving necessary data from the user. After doing this, I grabbed the user's previously entered first and last name and saved it as a session variable. By echoing these 2 sessions, this page will display the user's name at the top to confirm it is indeed them. In this file, I used another form which provided a list of skills that are commonly found in CIS tutors. By using type checkbox, it provides the user with clickable boxes next to each skill, allowing them to click on ones they have required. In order to keep track of the user's added skills, I created an if statement to check for submitted user inputs. If submitted, these skills are then placed in an array, which I called lang. In this file, I also practice with hidden fields for the user's first and last name. A hidden field will not be seen by the user, but it is often helpful to pass data between files. However, even though I used hidden fields and practiced with cookies, I gravitated towards session objects to store all the essential data to run the functions on the results page. After the skills are selected, the form sends the user to my experience.php page. This page also begins with a session start, which is again necessary to continue to track and store the user's input. This page provides the user with a text box, which allows them to enter a written response. In this section, they are asked to record any previous tutoring or college experiences that might aid in their tutoring ventures. As you can see at the top, I save the user's skills data in the session for later use. After the user types in his or her experiences and selects submit, it will take them to my confirmation page. This page serves as a display that shows all the user's previously entered input from the last 3 pages, which includes their first and last name, selected skills, and entered experiences. Once the user confirms the information, they are sent to the results page. Again, we place session start at the beginning of the file for data storage. From sessions, I grab the first and last name from the user, which was saved previously in topics.php. For the skills, I got them from the previously created lang object array object that kept up with the only the skills selected that the user had selected that was recently discussed in the if statement. To get the user's experiences from the previous file, I first saved the data into a session variable, and then after that I displayed it to the user. And then finally is the results.php page. This page determines whether the user is applicable to be a tutor. I created a function in which incorporates some of the user's previously entered input to make this decision. I decided that the user must have selected 5 skills from the topics.php file, which is about half of the skills available for the user to pick from. The desired variable holds the desired amount, which is 5, while the possessed variable holds the user's actual selected amount. In this function, which is called checkResults, it compares these 2 variables using 2 if statements to determine what feedback to display by the user. If the user's selected skills are less than the desired amount, the function will display to the user that they do not meet the requirements. If the user does have at least 5 skills, then it will show that they are indeed applicable and have been accepted to receive an interview for the position. After I finished building the application, I needed to upload it to GitHub in order to start knocking out different dev challenges. First, I went to GitHub. Under repositories, I clicked on New and created one for my tutoring application, which I called Class Survey. After I created it, I copied my repository's web URL, then used git bash to upload my application. I CD'd to my 5 PHP files and pushed them to my repository. After my PHP files were successfully pushed to my repository, I was one step closer to knocking out the dev challenges. However, GitHub is not able to deploy PHP code, which was needed to allow you to see a deployed version of my application. To fix this issue, I headed over to Heroku. Because of Dev 7, I already had previous experience on deploying a certain branch from GitHub through Heroku. However, this time, I would be branching from my own repository instead of working with our previous dev profile branch. After logging into Heroku, I first clicked on my name, which led me to the necessary dashboard to deploy my application. Within the dashboard, I then clicked on the Deploy tab. This is where the GitHub connection takes place. Once in Deploy, it was time to connect my Heroku to my newly made tutoring application repository. I then clicked Disconnect and selected my new personal repository, which was named Class Survey, which contained my 5 PHP files. After successfully connecting, I then had to choose from which branch to deploy from. For Dev 7, I created a branch in order to run my dev profile page. In this case, all my necessary files were in my main branch, which is what I selected in Heroku. Once the GitHub and branch connection was complete, I clicked Deploy Branch, which then displayed an active test link. This link took me to my working tutor application, allowing me to see my code in full display. Not only did this allow me to complete the deployment dev challenge, but it also allowed me to use my application for other dev challenges due to having an active deployment link. Because this application contains several different concepts, I was able to submit it for several different dev challenges using issue cards. Here's a look at a few of them for the different devs. As mentioned, by connecting my app to Heroku, I was also able to submit it for the deployment dev challenge. In my issue card, I linked to my source code, which was stored in my repository and my Heroku test deployment site. I also displayed pictures to further explain the process in which I just went over. For my dev code submission, I went over my function on my results page, which checks whether a user was applicable to be a tutor or not. It is important to mention that this first dev challenge, this was the first one I submitted for using this application, and as you know, my syntax was really bad, and thanks for letting that slide, by the way, on this one. And then I submitted the dev without a deployment link originally. But then by deploying my app through Heroku, it allowed this dev challenge to work. Next, I submitted it for the Dev MD challenge, which, once again, I described my application, showing where the model data was and how it was used by my code. In this case, the model data was the skills input from the topics.php page, which was where the user selected the skills they had obtained. This data was then used on my results page to run my check results function. I also linked both my source code and Heroku deployment site as well. As you notice, I believe I took a huge step forward in my syntax game on this one, or at least I'd like to think I did. And then finally, I submitted it for the Dev Level Up challenge. In this issue card, I explained how my application checked for user input, how it passes input through each file, and then finally how it used this input to record results for the user. Like the other previous devs, I also included code snippets properly this time instead of, I guess I'll mention it, pictures, but I'd use this to display the necessary code for each challenge. Finally, just to wrap it up, I really appreciate you working with me through my obnoxiously busy baseball schedule. It definitely made it a lot easier on me and reduced a lot of stress. Thanks again, and Hominator out.